Hello and welcome back to Scottish Independence Podcasts. We're about to have a discussion with Fatima Joji, who has taken on the huge task of relaunching, re-energising, refocusing Women for Independence.
I'm sure Fatima would be first to say that she's not taking it on alone, which is true. They've reconstituted the Women for Indy National Grouping, National Forum, I think they call it. We started thinking about this back in early in the year when it was International Women's Day. And at that point, Women for Indy brought out a new leaflet, which was the beginning of the relaunch.
We'll link to the leaflet below and also Women for Indy's website, so you can find out more about that. We're both former or possibly present Women for Indy members. I'm not sure, we'll have to check. And I think it's fair to say that the conversation did go quite wide. So I hope you find this interesting.
Yeah.
Right, let's join Fatima in the studio.
Welcome along to the Indypodcasters studio. You've taken on being the convener, is that the title?
No, we actually don't have clear leadership roles. We see ourselves as everyone being equal. So what we try to do is get a geographical spread. So we try and ensure that we have at least 2 people from each region on the committee. So, but we do have a national coordinator. They are in a paid role and they handle all our administration, our website, our social media. So that would help get things going and moving, because it can be difficult for a group of volunteers to try and handle that. So no clear convener. The structure is we're all equal and we try and ensure that we're from all over Scotland.
Yeah, that sounds really good. So we know you've just had an AGM. If you want to tell us a bit about what happened, and then just it'd be good to know what outcomes you'd like from being active in Women for Indy, and where you'd like to see it, pick up from what it's done in the past.
Excellent. I'm actually excited too, because it was a really really buzzing atmosphere, and I feel really raring to go, to be honest. And so we had our AGM last month, and we held it in Edinburgh. And we did have a few guest speakers. So a lot of our members are interested in what happens internationally as well as what happens locally. And we also want to try and cement Scotland's position on the world stage. So we believe that these connections are very important when we invite speakers. So we did have a few women come along in person. We also gave an opportunity for people to attend online. And we ensured that the forum was such that people felt able to have honest discussions about our current situation and the way forward, both in terms of the independence movement in general and Women for Independence as an organisation. So that was the structure of the conversation for that day. And the input was incredible. Everyone there, like I always say, it's good to have constructive criticism, not destructive narratives out there, and I would say that everyone there was constructive in their criticism. So we were looking at how we can rebuild momentum, because as you said, Marlene, we need to recognise that's happening across the independence movement, and people are also, life is happening to a lot of people. We've been through a pandemic, we're dealing with the cost of living crisis, so it's not necessarily that people have given up on independence, but we're still going in spite of all that. So I think that's really important to highlight.
Yes.
So in terms of the way forward for independence, we will be having our first executive meeting. We managed to add more people to our committee. We'll have our first executive meeting at the end of this month, and some of the action points we'll be taking forward is redrafting and updating our Women Manifesto. So for any listeners that don't know what that is, what we try to do, we want to ensure that we're ready ahead of any Scottish Parliament election as well, because we try to speak to pro-independence parties to take these policy platforms forward so that we can ensure that we're taking women along with us, because independent Scotland is a means to an end. It's not independence because. So we are showing the sort of policies women care about that we need to work on now and ensure that we cement that in an independent Scotland when we get the full powers.
This was maybe an earlier draft because I've had 5 overarching areas: human rights, health, well-being, the economy, food and the environment, and immigration. But at this point, it was the work is not finished. We have more to do. And they suggested areas such as criminal justice, professional and skills development, housing, homelessness, power, pay, pensions, education and transport. So a huge agenda.
Yeah, we're certainly going to add to it. We want to ensure that we have some sort of consultation with different groups, and we want to do some outreach to even pensioners for India as well. But obviously, we just want to hear from women, in fairness, because it will be a women manifesto. So we'll be looking to women within these groups to feed into this policy document, and it will be that will be our guide going forward, our campaign guide. It will also be our lobbying guide within the independence movement towards political parties. So that's a big project we'll be undertaking. We'll certainly be holding a lot more events as well to reconnect with the grassroots across the board. Our overarching aim is just to ensure that women, we're not only just present in name and numbers, but we're present with our voices, and those voices are carrying weight and leading from the front. That's what we ultimately want to ensure is happening with Women for Independence, because we are over 50% of the population, and we need to make sure that we take over 50% of the population with us to the polls to vote for a referendum and to secure support for independence in general.
Noble aims, I think. And you're coming from such a position of power in a way, because Women for India was so well respected and so widely supported. I think what I'd maybe like you to tell us a bit more about is how you're refreshing and getting it going again. Because my experience, I was with Clackmannanshire Women for India, Wifeys. We were incredibly active as a group, very, very much so. In fact, the reason I'm doing this podcast now is because we started a podcast with Clack's Wifey a few years back, and it just sort of grew from that. But unfortunately, having been out every weekend and really, really active, COVID was extremely difficult to get over. Although we kept in touch all the way through it, we really struggled to get back into the habit of meeting and going and doing things. Some people were still shielding. It really was very difficult to get going. And then the other thing that really got in our way was the whole GRA debate. There were very polarized views on both sides and a group in the middle who didn't really know. And that started to dominate conversations, and people sort of didn't want to have that conversation. Others came at it from the combination of COVID and the GRA sort of put paid to what had been a very active group. And I don't know how much that sort of experience is multiplied up, because right now the only active group I can think of for Women for India is probably Selma Rahman and the Edinburgh group. But I don't know, maybe the position is not as bad as that. Maybe there's a lot more going on than I'm aware of. Give us some hope for the future.
Yeah, there are actually a few more local Women for India groups that are active, and one of the constructive criticisms that we had feedback on, and that actually came from Selma as well, was the importance of connecting with these local groups, because they are on the ground. So we want to ensure that Women for Independence is not acting in isolation at a national level. So part of our plan is to have sort of a steering group meeting where we have representatives from the grassroots Women for Independence groups feeding into the national Women for Independence Executive Committee. And we are hoping that a platform such as that will allow us to take everyone with us, because I think message discipline is also really important in terms of ensuring that we're uniform. So such a platform would enable us to discuss our messaging at a national and local level as well, so that we are not confusing people, so that people know exactly what they're joining to. And we also want to ensure that it's an environment where people feel respected for having different views. That's really important, because we can't pretend that in independent Scotland we're all going to agree on everything. So we can, as a movement, move like that. So that's something that personally I'm keen to ensure happens. So yes, we do have certain platforms, respect differences, including in gender as well. But whatever side of the debate you sit on in the GRA, you're welcome, but please respect these differences and let that not dominate the conversation, because what we really want to do is secure independence. We want to redesign our website, actually, because we hope that local groups will be able to utilize that and advertise their events on our website. We can also have a login hub there as well. So that is really key. And we want to do a lot of media too.
That would be something I would really welcome seeing, because my experience, again, is that the websites were not good. And I know there was an attempt to redesign it, again, probably around the COVID time. Didn't really work. And what I'm wondering is, just you're talking about groups, and it's great to hear there are some local groups still on the go. But there's probably a lot of people like me and Marlene who were in groups but are now individuals who would support. So is there a way that individual women can be part of Women for Indie without being part of a local group?
Yeah, so I think there's actually a lot of confusion around membership. So you can sign up as an individual. You don't need to be a part of a local group. I wasn't part of a local group when I joined Women for Independence. I joined as an individual, and at that time, Women for Independence, the momentum was down. There was barely anyone in the exec, and they were like, Fatima, let's just try and I think a lot of what I was doing was crisis management, trying to get us. So I was just trying to ensure that we don't collapse. To be very clear, so I just wanted to ensure that didn't happen, because it would have been a massive loss to the movement if we lost Women for Independence. So we had a very short time frame to try and re-establish our position within the independence movement, and our launch was on International Women's Day to make a point. And we produced leaflets, and included in that leaflet was key points on WASPy women, for example, human rights and what independence can do for women and our place in the movement. So we were hoping that message would trickle down and resonate with people and individuals on the ground, to try and ensure that, yes, we're here, we're going to exist as a group that operates at a national level and supports women on the ground as well, because we cannot give up. And I hope that we want to instill that enthusiasm through the sort of leadership we want to bring. I'm not saying we're trying to dominate women's spaces, but just as an organisation, we want to show, okay, we exist here and utilise us. You have that support, and that's the sort of platform we want to be and continue to be until we're independent. So if that answers your question,
that's really encouraging. And I mean, as I say, Women for Indie is so well respected as an organisation that you're kind of pushing at an open door. I think it does sound more like it's a sort of supporting structure that needs to be in place to allow people to then take part in something that they generally would want to be part of. You mentioned a leaflet there. Where could people get hold of stocks of those?
We left it, because we don't have a physical office, we left it in the Believe in Scotland office, because we partnered with them to produce it, but we obviously took the lead on it because it is a Women for Independence leaflet. So there's physical copies with them. We also put up a digital copy on our social media as well.
All right.
So people can go on and have a look as well. I think I'll ask our national coordinator to pin it to the page, because it would be helpful, be easier for people rather than scrolling down.
What social media are you on? We'll put them in the notes, and then people can maybe start following you on some of these platforms. Yeah,
so our Facebook and Instagram is active. We do have X, but we are reluctant to use that, so that's been dormant. We're about to have a conversation at our first executive meeting at the end of this month. We need to make a decision whether we're going to close down X or reinstate it. So that's a conversation to be had.
Blue Sky is much nicer.
Absolutely. Personally, I've come off X as well personally, and I'm enjoying Blue Sky a lot better.
We did that.
A lot of people are saying we're just operating in a bubble. It's actually not a bubble. It's just people are being more respectful, because I think everyone's missing that.
And also it doesn't have the same sort of limitations of algorithms that X had. So you actually can see a lot wider range of things, and also people can see you as well, which is I think it's much better. I was quite interested to see how you were talking about how the national executive, your national executive, that might not be the right name for it, works. Because I've just assumed that your national executive would be made up from people who were in local groups. Now, I'm making that assumption because that's how Pensioners for Indie works. So we've got a national coordinating group for Pensioners for Indie, and the people on it, they come onto it because they're active in their local group. So at one point it was about a dozen local groups. It's not a dozen now, it's maybe kind of 4 or 5, but we'll get there. So, but that sounds like with you, the national coordinating group is not quite so definitely linked into the local ones. Is that right? Have I picked that up right?
With the National Executive Group, we don't want to restrict membership. So you don't necessarily have to be a member of a local group to be on the National Executive Group. But I think, I think you've made a fair point. And it is a reality that to some extent, we are a bit disconnected from local groups. So going forward, we want to ensure that that connection exists. So that's part of our renewed focus. But we want to do that whilst maintaining the point that you don't need to be a member of a local group to be on the National Executive Committee, because some people would just prefer one area. They would prefer to keep that distance. But and it's not for anything negative or malicious. It's just they probably don't want to be in too many groups. Yeah. And that's completely fine. So there's no restriction. Whether you're or not you're a member, that's fine. But we will have a steering group. We will start that. And the steering group membership would require you to be a member of the local group. And the steering group will meet with the National Executive Group. That
sounds like a really good way to take it forward. Yeah. The Edinburgh group invited Fiona and I along to, actually it was their AGM.
We were their guests.
Yeah, we were their guests. We were guest speakers along with Sam Page from Yes for EU. And there wasn't a big number of people there, but it was very enjoyable. And it was a group of well-informed folk, good questions. We really enjoyed it. And it was at that point I was sort of thinking, well, I just hope Women for Indy does get back on the front foot, as it will. And that sounds like exactly what you hope for it as well. Yeah,
we're going to work hard at it. And obviously we want accountability. So that steering group will be that platform for accountability. So we're being really serious about this, because we do need Women for Independence, but we also need it to function really well.
Yeah.
So constructive criticism is welcome, and we're taking that on board.
You need that support as well, because however committed you are, you cannot do it on your own anyway. You have to have a network there.
During the 2014 referendum, I wasn't very active. I was always going to vote yes, especially once I'd looked at the finances of Scotland and, saw how rich a country we are. But I was always going to vote yes, but I wasn't very active. But one of the things I did do was I went along to a meeting which was organised by Women for Indy, and it was in one of the halls in the Glasgow Concert Hall complex. Now, it was a big hall. It wasn't the concert hall, but it's a big hall. Must have been at least 500 people in it. And I kind of walked in and went, oh, wow, this is impressive. And I sat there, and you know what these meetings are like. You don't know the person next to you, but you always end up chatting to them. And I was just enjoying it. And I found myself listening to Jean Freeman, Philippa Whitford, might have been Alison Phillips, not quite so sure about, but certainly the other two. And, I went, God, Struth, these women are impressive. And, it was just a kind of a highlight for me of that whole time.
Women for Indy was really particularly good at, I think, was supporting women who wanted to get into political roles. And even Marlene mentioned there Philippa Whitford and Jean Freeman and Nicola Sturgeon, of course. Is that still part of your focus, trying to get women into Holyrood or councils or whatever? Because it seems to me that we're facing a challenge there, because a lot of young, capable women are choosing to step out of Holyrood after maybe only serving, a term, which probably says something about, the challenges that the job brings, and whether we've yet got a situation where people can juggle all the bits of their life effectively. But is that something you see as important in the future?
Absolutely. So I think one of the things that, me coming into Women for Independence, I wasn't part of the Women for Independence back then. So I'm sort of coming in with a fresh perspective. So I probably don't know about that support. No, I don't know about that support that was back then. But bringing it up, I would hope we wouldn't rule it out, because that's really important to have pro-independence voices within our politics, because that's where we're going to be able to create the change and push for a referendum. So that's really important that we have women elected to these positions. And you made a really good point about women. Once we get in, we tend to leave, and that's a problem. A lot of focus has been on getting women into politics, but what happens after that? We struggle with keeping women in, and that's something that I would absolutely take back to Women for Independence and say that should really be a strong focus of ours. And we will be pursuing good relationships with national organisations like Elect Her and Women 50-50 Gender. They do a lot of work in trying to get women elected and supported throughout their political career. And in terms of the support, I don't want to put us in a position where we feel that we have the answers and we are that organisation that exists that way, because it's such an undertaking. But we would like to be part of that part of the solution, absolutely. And
Yeah.
because of the way, and I'm able to say this without having a discussion with the executive, because I know it's in our manifesto that it's women supporting women is really important, regardless of which field we're in. And I do think that Women for Independence also has an opportunity to join that discussion that seems to promote the illusion of equality for women in politics as well. I think that's another angle that we need to address.
Yeah.
Yes, we have women in politics, but there is that illusion that we're making progress when the environment is still not built for us.
I noticed that just the cabinet reshuffle that John Sweeney's just had, I think it's 11 out of 14 cabinet secretaries are now women, which is, that for once the balance is actually swung in our favour. But I think for women in politics in particular, there's that whole misogyny, the amount of abuse that they get is horrific, just horrific. And I mean, the amount of abuse anybody gets on some of these platforms is dreadful, but it really seems much worse for women, and it seems much worse for women in politics. And I don't know how you fix that. It's such a wider cultural challenge, that misogyny.
Yeah, and we're looking at attitudinal change, which takes a long time.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that we're battling with as well. And, I also say it starts in the home, it starts in the classrooms. We really need to work from the ground up. And that is something that we have to commit to, and not just, and even if we solve it, if we want to, one day, I'm hoping that one day we can solve it and say that we're waking up in a Scotland where there's no such thing as misogyny. We can't stop preventing it from coming back. That needs to keep going on. So it's a job that's never going to end. So,
And things do change. Things do change. Progress can be made. It's you're right. It's a long time.
A couple of things came into my mind there, which was, when I was going for job interviews. So, I was in my 20s, and we sit in a job interview, and people would say, well, are you planning to have children? Because, and of course we all just lied and said no, because that was what was part and parcel of it. And then, so my daughter, who's now in her 40s, was telling her that, and she was just completely aghast. And, because it just doesn't happen now. So, I'm sort of aware that there have been some, a lot actually of improvements in that ways. But then the thing that's now come into it, which wasn't there for me, obviously, in the 70s and 80s, is social media. You just did not get you couldn't get a pile on from someone who did get themselves a decent job, and then suddenly you've got some guy who probably, hasn't been out of his bedroom that day, he's just been clacking away on his keyboard, sending off rubbish, cut stuff about some woman who's just trying to do a really good job. So things change.
Anonymity.
Yes, and that's right, anonymity. And so things do change, but then other factors come into it. You're right about attitudinal change. I mean, that's long term.
Yeah.
Hopefully there can be a way kind of through the whole social media kind of angst that goes on. But You'd also think that just more practical stuff. I mean, I assumed that because, let's talk about Holyrood, but it probably applies to other parliaments in the country as well. They worked out a way to keep the place running during COVID. You could be at home, you could zoom in, and they would have debates, and you could, they're still there. I mean, the TV screens are up in Holyrood. And I just thought, well, that must help. That's obviously needed for COVID, but actually that would help people with kids as well, men and women.
Men and women. So would more local democracy, though, because that whole having to come to a central point, they've shown with the response to COVID that actually, no, you don't always have to be in a central point. But the more decision making, if we could get, more of a normal balance between what decisions are made at the centre and what happens in local councils and regional councils, then that in itself would help, because for everybody, having to work away from home 4 nights a week, 5 nights a week is a strain. And how can you do a job as well as you could if you're constantly juggling all these, like constantly travelling up and down the country? But it's a hard gig.
Yes, it is. And like you were saying, Fiona, I mean, and there are some of the younger MSPs, women MSPs at Holyrood that are stepping back. And I mean, I'm not sure I know about one in particular, and it's not so much to do with children, it's for another reason, but it's just such a shame if there are people who are still there who could do a good job, and they're going, but I kind of feel I have got to step back now because I want to be around for my family more.
I know.
Or just other things. I mean, Marie Gouchon, I think, stepping down. Now she's got other things she wants to do. Maybe this is a positive choice she's making.
Yeah.
But again, it's another young, capable woman who is choosing to go elsewhere. I don't know, maybe it just opens the door for other people to come in. But you'd like to think that somebody somewhere in Holyrood is at least doing a bit of asking the question, why is this happening? And is there barriers that they might be able to overcome?
Well, that's a good point, isn't it? That people are asking the questions. And it sounds like, Fatima, it sounds like that you and the others on the executive and, the local groups want to be in there now asking those and other questions, which is just fantastic.
No, absolutely. And the questions are being asked in Parliament, because I'm sure there was a committee that was dedicated to discussing women's participation in politics. Because I do know that Talat Yaqub, for example, who does I think she fed into it as well. So that is happening. But then it's what happens next.
Yes.
That's the thing. I just don't want a situation where we're just hearing the problems, but we're very slow, or we're not attacking, or we're not really head-on challenging this, taking on solutions. And I think that also shows something else. It shouldn't have taken something like the pandemic to push us into new ways of being more accessible with work. Yeah. We shouldn't be reacting that way. We should be proactive.
That's evolution, isn't it? You respond to changes in your environment.
Exactly.
And the people who adapt, they thrive. There was a big stushy in Westminster because just in the dying days of the Tory government, they were determined that everybody was going to come back into the House, and they weren't going to do all this nonsense, newfangled remote working, and how dare people think they could work from home. And you just thought, God, you've been handed this massive progress, and their immediate instinct is to row back to when it didn't work, or it only worked if you were a rich single white man,
What you've said and what also Marlene said, it's just popped something into my mind as well regarding social constructs such as gender roles. Because in this whole discussion, we were talking about how women can't engage because they have to look after their children, etc. But what about making it easier for men to be able to support their partners in taking on childcare responsibilities? Because that's an issue we face. The men don't have to worry about that.
I was on holiday last week. I was in Stockholm. Yeah. And one thing that we noticed, apart from the fantastic public transport, what we noticed was how many men there were with prams walking around enjoying the sunshine. We're going, what is all these men with prams? And I actually started photographing a couple to tell Marlene. And then I thought, I probably shouldn't be photographing men with prams on the sidewalk. But the reason that there's so many men with prams out enjoying the sunshine with the kids is they've got fantastic paternity leave. Yeah. So, they're able to be more involved right from the very beginning. Well, it's a much more equal society anyway. Yeah. Even little things like the platforms and the trains level completely. So if you've got a pram, you just push. There you go. You're not looking for somebody at the station to put a ramp down so you can get, it just is more progressive. And they're not rocket science kind of solutions. If we want women to have a better deal, if they have children, well, part of the way of doing that is improving things for men so they can be more involved and take more of the share of the responsibility. I mean,
that's just reminded me of, when Jacinda Ardern, became the Prime Minister in New Zealand and had and then her husband he was at home with the baby. I think the baby was was just a baby at the time, and I remember there was headlines. Everyone, I mean, they weren't antagonistic or everything, but it just shows you how much of a unusual thing that is. That look, her husband's going to stay at home with the baby, and and she had a really important job, and so obviously that must have helped her do it. Although there are obviously other strains that come into it as well, but yeah, it's still an unusual thing, isn't it? So yeah,
it needs to be normalised. Yeah, and that's why I'm in favour of concepts like the wellbeing economy. If we adopt the wellbeing economy, for example, we will be able to push through policies and solutions that actually are geared towards creating equality between men and women across various fields and sectors, and that includes caring roles and equal paternity and maternity leave as well, because it's actually better for the well-being of both parents.
Yes, and the kids.
and the kids. The most important thing, the kids as well. And I'm sure. Yeah, every kid wants a relationship with both parents and where possible, and we need to see that and normalise it.
That would be a really good thing for Women for Independence to kind of join in the push for that. I mean, as it happened, I was at a talk last night by Gordon McIntyre Kemp, organised by Glasgow Northwest. And I mean, I've heard him talk, well, we've interviewed him about Wellbeing Society, but it's just interesting to hear him give a whole talk about it. You know, he's a very good speaker. That still somehow, it just seems like, why isn't, it's a kind of it's a win-win situation to try and put that forward. And yet, SNP, well, it is SNP, I think it's SNP policy through the SNP party conventions, but ScotGov doesn't seem to quite push it in Parliament in the way they should. So
I can answer that.
Oh, go on then. Go on.
So I'll take it from the outset. So obviously we're saying it's not rocket science, but then also if you think of the people in charge, they might not want to make changes that benefits them. So if some men feel, for example, that, if we implement a wellbeing economy, we lose some of that power because we're sharing it with women, you know, that would be like, that's the sort of angle I've seen sometimes from some, not all, who are reluctant to implement such changes because they like things as they are. The second point on the Scottish government. So that's why we need Scottish independence, because we want to implement a wellbeing economy. The Scottish government, even on their whole website, they have an area dedicated to wellbeing economics and, you know, the sort of things we're pushing through, but we just do not have all the powers to fully implement what we want within the models of a wellbeing economy. So that's the restraint, that's the limitation we're dealing with just now.
Yes, absolutely. And it's good to know there is a big chunk of it. I mean, I do sometimes think that it gets mentioned almost as a buzzword, and that we know we've got to use the word, but we don't really know what it means. Marlene, you said it's a win-win. It kind of is a win, but somebody loses sometimes. And even if it's people like, you know, the fossil fuel companies got a vested interest in the status quo. And as you just said, Fatima, power, the sense of losing your power or your monopoly or your control is huge. So that kind of is where the conversation really needs to start, isn't it? Why is this good for everybody? And I mean, I kind of think, how could it not be good for everybody that you have a planet that's not ravaged, that we can all actually live on? You know, that you haven't got an economy that's so extractive that it's going to destroy our climate and that we're not going to be able to thrive. It just seems so basic, these fundamental things. And yet you've got whole lobbies of powerful people demanding the right to drill, baby, drill, as the great orange one said.
So, you know, you're not getting into the States now, actually, Fiona. Having said that.
He's angry with Scotland as well, so he might just ban all of us.
Well, you know, badge of honour, I think.
If only we could ban him and, you know, stop him from coming to meet up with Charlie later on. I'm maybe not so optimistic about just how much ScotGov, well, it is SNP, are behind the wellbeing economy. I mean, I know there's all that on the website, and I mean, I know going back to when Nicola was First Minister, I mean, you know, she got us being part of that. There's a whole wellbeing governmental group who make different, Iceland, I think, is in it, and there's other sort of countries. She was part and parcel of that, and I know that she really did push it. Actually, Humza, I think, pushed it quite a lot, at least in his campaign. Seems to me it's taken a bit of a back step since, although, you know, fair enough, John Swinney had other things he had to preoccupy himself with when he took over. So maybe I'm being unduly kind of, I'm not exactly pessimistic, but I can't quite see it happening. But I certainly hope so. And anything that any of us can do to communicate just how important and positive a move that would be, you know, it just needs doing, really. So.
Yeah, I think maybe it's a case of us needing to amplify it more, because I do know that John Swinney as First Minister is absolutely in support of a wellbeing economy. So I think we just need to push it more. We need to get more serious about it. Absolutely, I'm not going to shy away from the fact that that we need to do more. We always need to do more, and that's certainly something that we need to acknowledge, and hopefully that we'll take forward and make sure that we don't take a step back, that we're always moving forward.
In terms of sort of visibility then of your refreshed Women for Indie, What are we going to see that we're not used to seeing? Where are you going to be? How do we find you?
So so if we had our executive meeting before this podcast, I think I would have been able to share more, because a lot of what I want to discuss, it needs to be agreed as well. So I don't want to say things that we haven't all committed to yet, but what I can certainly share is that I can guarantee you will see changes, because that's something that we are determined to implement. And in terms of visibility, we'll be pushing more media, we'll be pushing more communication with groups, because it's not enough to just sit on social media and post things out. So it's the communication with the grassroots, because it will spread from there. And we want to ensure that it's a situation where it's going from the ground up and not top bottom. So I'm hoping we'll see that the result of these changes to the structure and the way we operate will improve visibility, not just for Women for Independence on the national stage, but locally, because I think it all comes down to support and communication.
It does.
I think these are two things that I think every organisation needs to keep learning about and unlearning where it doesn't work as well.
Yeah, we can help, if in terms of
brilliant.
Well, in terms of getting messages out, we've got a YouTube platform, we've got a podcast. We've got what's about 10,000 views a month we get on various different things. If you want to come back and give us an update after your next meeting, or want us to cover some of your events or anything, then do shout, because we're very keen to amplify voices that are making a difference in the Yes movement. That's kind of our role, really.
I'm nodding with excitement because I'm taking you up on that. So.
And I hope that the local groups get a bit, manage to get a bit more active and offering. When I did join, I'm in the West End of Glasgow, so I was on the the list for Glasgow West End Women for Indie, and at that point, so it was before COVID, and I can't think, well, nothing much is happening now. To be fair to them, they did a lot. I mean, during the referendum campaign, actually, it was pretty active group, but it wasn't by that time. And then there was four of us, I think, who had joined more recently, and we kept saying on Facebook, "Look, is there not a meeting or can we meet up?" And eventually, the four of us just used to meet for a cup of coffee for maybe over about 6 months. We did that. We'd meet, every couple of weeks, we'd meet up and have a chat, and it was informal. It wasn't a kind of Women for Indie meeting. It was just us who'd got to know each other through that, and we'd sit and chat about what we thought Scottish government should be doing at the time. And these conversations are always quite enjoyable, aren't they? So, I just hope that gets going again, because there's a life to it, isn't there? There's energy and there's dynamism, and sometimes really good ideas come out of it.
Some kind of little toolkit on how to get a local group up and running, because I'm still in touch with some of the people from Clackswifeys. We are very good friends of mine, where we meet up all the time, but we're not actually doing it under the badge of Women for Indie, and I kind of think, should we have a go and try and get the band together again? But to do that, I think it would be really useful to remember what is the remit, what is the focus, and what do we want groups to be committing to or doing, or are they signing up to a constituency or something like that? So just something that a starter for 10 might be quite good for people wanting to get groups going.
Mention of a toolkit, that's actually a really good idea that I'll take back to the committee, because I think that'll be really helpful for new groups to establish, so that they can actually know which direction they can probably consider going in, not to control, but just to suggest
a starting point.
Just a starting, just get help setting up, or reaching out to other women, for example. And you mentioned a really good point as well, and that's just the element of socializing, just coming together, just unwinding and relaxing, because it doesn't always have to all be brain switched on, going through an agenda, hearing a treasury report. I was like, that's why a lot of people don't come to community council meetings, because it's all right. We just read report after report. Don't worry, I'm saying as a councillor that I enjoy it, but then I'm probably in the minority, but a lot of people don't, and it's because we just want to be able to relax, because we probably just had a very busy day, whether that's looking after the kids or at work, and that's really important, just to come together. And
that space for women to talk to other women is precious as well, isn't it?
Absolutely.
People have different conversations in a group of women to what you'd have in a mixed group. It's just the way it is. Yeah. But anyway, that's been a really quite a wide-ranging chat, and we've probably thrown all sorts of things at you that are more than the remit that you've perhaps got. But I thoroughly enjoyed chatting to you there, Fatima, and best of luck, absolutely best of luck with getting it all up and running again. And we're very much, supportive. So do call on us if we can help, and I'll go and have a look at the website and see how I can reactivate my membership.
Brilliant! Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
No, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. No, I really enjoyed this conversation, truly, and thank you for having. And the community, absolutely, you'll probably get sick of us. We're absolutely going to take you up on the offer to work. So it'll be good to also introduce you at a steering group committee when other groups are there once we get that set up. So good.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that. Don't forget to subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're listening on YouTube, you can click the little bell and you get a reminder whenever we put out a new episode, which is every Friday.
And sign up for our mailing list. You can do that from the website. And we always send one out at the beginning of each month to tell you what's happening. Last but not least, you can buy us a coffee on coffee.com.
And we'll catch you later. Bye now.